Hey there, Live Like Your Nail Color gals. Today is the 1-year anniversary of the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast. I can hardly believe it's been a year already. And as I start another year, I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you to my gal pal guests who have been so generous with their time and their openness. Thank you for sharing this podcast with others. And thank you to those behind the mic, including my production team and marketing support. Without all of you, none of this would be possible, which means relationships are essential. Relationships help us get things done. And especially as women, our closest relationships have a tremendous impact on how we see ourselves and experience our world every day. So that's why today I'm kicking off another episode mini-series that I'm calling Women's Essential Relationships. Together, we're going to explore our relationships as adult women with senior parents, romantic partners, siblings, female friends. And having been on this planet for several decades, you've had chip happen in those relationships. I know, because I have too. But how have those moments shaped us? And at this point, what can we do to use those moments to become stronger, healthier, and happier? That's what we're going to explore. But first, before we dive into our conversation, have you taken my quiz to determine your nail color persona? It's really simple. All you have to do is go to livelikeyournailcolor.com, answer a few quick questions, and in your results, discover your specific nail color persona, your built-in strengths, and how to tap into those strengths when chip happens. Again, go to livelikeyournailcolor.com. Now, let's get this new mini-series started.
Tired of so much chip happening? Discouraged by so much downer news? Weary from chronic crisis? Don't let the chips keep you down. Welcome to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast, where the tips of your fingers and toes are ready to inspire you to not give up and to keep creating the business, career, and life you want. In each episode, we flip the chip and let our fun nail color with that crazy fun name cheer us on to remember our strengths, embrace the power of choice, see life as an adventure, and know resilience is only a touch-up or change-up away. Get ready for a good time and a good laugh with your host, Mary Foley.
Welcome back, Live Like Your Nail Color gals. To start off the Women's Essential Relationships mini-series, we're talking with Dr. Sherri Yoder, who is back with us a second time, which actually kind of appropriate, right? Like this is the second year of the podcast and she's back for the second time. In episode 39, we already talked about mental health and that it's something for all of us. And to thrive mentally starts with our thoughts. Or put another way, all success starts between your ears. And if you haven't listened to this episode, I highly recommend you check it out. You'll understand why I asked Dr. Sherri back. She's got great energy and so many quotables. I loved it, loved it. Well, this time we're talking about a totally different topic, and that is breakup breakthroughs. If you've been in a romantic relationship, and I bet you have, particularly one where you believed it was your forever relationship. Like I finally found, that treasured person and I'm done. I mean, we're just going to go off, and happily ever after. But then it's suddenly over. Well, then the heartache and you have lots of questions that haunt you. Like, will I ever get over it? Why didn't I see the signs? Will I be able to love again? Dr. Sherri's been there. And she'll tell you more why about that. But I want you to know that she started her clinical psychology training to identify and navigate these kind of questions, to get on the other side and to thrive, which she then, because she went through the experience herself, she put it in together in a book called Breakup Breakthroughs, asking and answering the hard questions so you can thrive in the trauma of a relationship breakup, which, by the way, she describes as an invitation to the ultimate act of self-love, to understand yourself, to understand your desires, your expectations, your motives, and patterns on a deeper, more intentional level than ever before. And so that's why I thought, well, let's dive right in. She was so good last time. I know we're going to have a repeat performance. It's not really a performance. It's a conversation. Dr. Sherri, welcome back to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast.
Thank you, Mary. What a privilege to be here for the second time. I'm blown away. I just really excited to get into this because honestly, it's been a minute. It's been almost 3 years since I released this book. And so thank you for giving me an opportunity to relive and reprocess and maybe additionally process some of the stuff that I talked about in it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because, first of all, I think it's a gift when you articulate to yourself and then make it helpful to others when you've gone through something that's so traumatic.
Yeah.
So that's a gift in multiple ways, but it's also a gift, in some ways as time goes on, we've kind of all been there and we look back at a situation and then we think about it again. We go, oh, I see this now more clearly, or I understand the depth of what that, conclusion is. And so, I can appreciate that. Now, of course, before we get into all about breakup breakthroughs and questions and answers, this is the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast. So I always ask my guests, what's their nail color persona and did it nail you? Now, since you've already been on once, all right, I'm going to do just a quick recap.
Yeah.
And then I still want to ask you a little bit of feedback on that one. So you said last time that you are a naked Nelly on your fingers and a solid sister on your toes.
Yeah.
No Naked Nelly is about being your true authentic self.
Yeah.
Right. And showing it to the world because your fingers are always out there. Right. Whereas your toes could be tucked away and you can't see them so much. So that's a lot about authenticity and some transparency, some vulnerability.
Yeah.
Solid sister is a solid color because you like these, kind of ground. It's a groundedness. But, but when it comes to the color you like to wear, you have said dark purple or black, just very specific. So, and it's dark, but do you realize that purple is also a lot about transformation? It's about being comfortable in your own skin. And then that transformation, I think, I should say, if you in some transformation, you become more comfortable in your own skin.
Okay.
Right. So, and then black is usually about being very serious and mysterious. So I'm curious if any of those things with dark black and purple resonate with you.
Well, so the transformative part, probably, right? Because I'm a thought coach. I help people to transform their minds, right? To transform the way that they think, because I've done that work for myself. So that makes sense to me. The seriousness. So I guess I don't take myself so seriously. Maybe that's where the Naked Nelly authenticity, willingness to be vulnerable comes into play. But I do take my message quite seriously. And that's because lives depend on it. And I know that sounds like melodramatic, but it's not. Our very lives depend on our capacity to develop insight into the way that we think and to transform it into the way that is effective for living the life we say we want to live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think it nails you, just saying.
Yeah.
Okay. It does.
Nailed. Consider myself nailed.
Or, as I like to say, spot on, right?
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I think all those things are true about you. So I think my experience with you. So that's great. I'm glad. So I'm hoping that, you get some dark purple on your toes shortly if they're not there already.
Not yet, but it's coming because spring is here.
Spring is here. I know it's a fun time of year to put on bright new colors, whether they're really saturated or they're kind of more in the pastel-y. Well, I mentioned, as I introduced you to give people a sense of who you are and why are we talking about this topic with you about having, romantic relationships. And then you go, oh my gosh, what's happened? This book, Breakup Breakthroughs, that I'm looking at right now, have a copy of, so good. And one of the things I love about it is actually it's very Naked Nelly. You're very authentic with it. And I think that there's a lot of questions that help us all transform. But I want to start with, and I don't always do this, but I wanted to read part of your prologue, which is actually a letter that you write that starts, "Dear beloved sister." So if I can, I want to read that because it really sets up, just shows so much about you, and it sets up the rest of the book, but perhaps more sets up, the book is simply a process to help through, right? If they've been through a big breakup. So, and I got a question of course, I've got questions like afterwards. Starts like this. Dear beloved sister, 4 months ago, I left a man, a home, a life really, and so many other things that I once believed would have been my forever. My entire world tilted, like in a not so fun carnival ride, spilling a torrent of unexpected and expected, if I'm honest, questions, fears, doubts, and aching pain. That shift also graced me with breakthroughs. You see, I believe as a woman, in fact, I'm convinced as a woman, you have the power to thrive in any and every circumstance, especially in the darkest hollows that cloak our hearts in the trauma of a relationship breakup. It's not about blame, regret, or what could have been. It really is all about the breakthroughs. And I feel compelled to share my heart's journey with yours. If you've gone through a breakup in the past, it could be years, months, weeks, days, or maybe even today, and you're longing, just longing for somebody to understand what you're going through. Well, Breakup Breakthroughs, this book, will resonate with your secret places and broken spaces. You'll find relief from the pain and freedom from the shackles of nagging questions and intolerable longings. Above all, you will also discover your breathtaking grit, your extraordinary worth, and you will thrive. I didn't do it. I haven't done it. I am doing it.
Mhm.
Yes, I'm still doing it. And so will you. So let's break through. Love, Dr. Sheri.
Thank you so much. You just made me get a little misty there. That's, I just I still feel every word of that.
I loved it. It's powerful. And sometimes you need your own stuff read back to you, right? To hear it in a new way. I haven't been an author and I get that. I would love for you to share a little bit more about the relationship breakup that sparked your book.
Mhm.
We can just kind of really get a picture of that. I know it won't be like everybody's exactly, but just tell us your story, and then we'll dive into some more about the breakthrough part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at a high level, I had my clinical psychology practice. I had just turned 40, um, eh, partnerless, childless, however you want to look at that. And I wasn't exactly looking. I think I even talked about this in the book. And then at a chamber mixer, I was on the board at the Chamber of Commerce, right? Chamber mixer, I was introduced to this man. And eventually I was like, oh, I'm going to marry that man. And, I was head over heels. At this time, just to give you a little bit of context, I was transitioning away from being a clinical psychologist to normalizing mental health and speaking to, civic organizations, creating free speaking engagements, whatever it was, to be able to bring and normalize mental health for people. And so that shift was happening professionally as this relationship was building. And so from a time perspective, there was a lot going on. It wasn't just like I was going through my life and I was in my 9 to 5 and then I was in this relationship. There were a lot of layers to this. And I would say chief among them was that I was building my future, right? I was building my future professionally. And I thought I was building my future personally as well with this relationship. And it wasn't like insta family. It wasn't like that, but there were some blessings because he had 2 daughters, older. One was 13 at the time and the other had just graduated high school. And so there was a family element that I had kind of longed for my whole life. And here it was. And I thought this was going to be my it. We were together almost 5 years, and there were a lot of elements that were less than optimal that I settled for. And honestly speaking, I believe I alluded to this in the book. I don't remember though, but maybe not in these words. I spent almost 5 of those years trying to get him to love me.
Mm.
So if that gives you a picture or resonates with somebody listening, like if you're in a relationship where you feel like you're fighting to get somebody to love you the way that you need to be loved, the way that you deserve to be loved, the way that you were designed to be loved, then perhaps my story will resonate with you.
Yeah, almost like you wanted it to all be the forever and true. So you were head
Mhm.
over heels, but you didn't get it wasn't reciprocal, at least not the
No,
intent.
no.
If you were spending 5 years, and 5 years is a long time.
It's a long time, and I'll add something to that too. I want to. Your experience of a breakup is your experience, right? Like I shared this with you, Mary. I shared this in the book. Like my experience isn't going to be yours. Yours isn't going to be mine. There are no two breakups alike, and it doesn't matter if you're together for 1 year or 100 years. Well, if you're together for 100 years, then you're probably dead. But you get the point, right?
Got an extra special something going on with that, right? Okay.
Length of time
Yeah.
does not get to dictate your heart's response or a level of grieving that is appropriate or inappropriate. Your heart's response, as I discovered in my breakup, is all about how you were thinking about that relationship, how you were couching it, how you were hoping for it, how you were designing it to be in your head, and then having those needs unmet it's a huge grief experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter if there's time, and it honestly doesn't matter. We talked about this before offline, if there's marriage involved. If you are involved, if your heart is connected to somebody else's, there's going to be a grieving process when that's severed.
Yeah. No doubt. Right. And so many of the women listening right now, I mean, we've been on the planet for a number of decades, probably 4 or more. And the likelihood that we have attached our heart to someone and then had a breakup, we can those feelings are very, very similar. And everyone's detail is important. And yet, I could say, well, and everyone's is a little bit unique. The cool thing, though, I think that I really I appreciated about reading your book and how you've laid it out is that you still bring these really good questions that everyone can relate to, because there are some universal or some common feelings, and the processing of it is something that we can benefit from. And I know, you didn't just have a breakup. You had a breakup as a well-trained and honed clinical psychologist, right? So Dr. Sheri is meeting with herself, right? And processing through it. And that's what I find so helpful, because that is the gift that you can give all of us.
Yeah.
And in your book, there are 12 questions that you pose for us to work through and to answer to thrive, which I think is a key word, during a relationship breakup. And I've picked 3 of them today that I'd love to dive into. But before we do that, and that first question, this whole thing of thriving during versus thriving afterwards, can you speak to that? Because there's some hope in that in the moment.
I'd love to. Our again, going back to our expectations and the way that we think and how critical that is to the quality of life that we live. So thriving has been, kind of tossed around in like feminine product commercials. Like, you'll see somebody running through a field of daisies with a kite behind them, like, life is wonderful. Okay, that's not thriving. Let's get real about what thriving is. Thriving means to grow, flourish, and prosper. There is no growth that you will ever experience that is not painful. Pain is inherent in growth. So don't be fooled when the subtitle says asking and answering the hard questions so you can thrive in the trauma of a relationship breakup. I'm referring to work. I'm referring to work that is painful, that you would rather run away from, avoid, dismiss, whatever. And that I didn't. And God ordained this, I believe, at the perfect time, right on the cusp of a global pandemic.
which would
when
have a
this
lot of
book was
breakups.
written.
I mean,
Yes.
there were a lot of people
Right.
who said, I've been coexisting with you, but now we're a little
Right.
too cozy. And,
Right.
some people got closer, some couples got closer,
Yeah.
but quite a few of them said, we're done. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the thriving is the work that you do to grow as a person, right? And it's work about you. It's not about anybody else. It's not about the world getting something right, people doing something different, a new job coming your way, or new opportunity. No, this is about you. Because if you don't take the space to learn to thrive, to grow as you will keep living a life that is less than optimal, that could be downright damaging, and that's certainly not what God intended for you.
I love talking about, at the end of every episode, I do a flip the chip segment.
Yeah.
And what you just said is a flip the chip perspective.
Mm.
That thriving isn't about an external thing. It's about an internal thing. And even when you said, hey, there's no growth, and of course, it's internal growth.
Yeah.
Personal growth without pain of some level. Either
There's
mild
none.
discomfort or gut-wrenching breakup, traumatic breakthrough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you take the chip of the moment of the trauma and you flip it into growth. So let's dive in a couple of these, 3 of these questions that I picked out. I'm going to say the questions and then we'll go back to each, because everyone listening, I want you to get a sense of, see if you can relate to any of these questions, whether you're in a breakup right now, a recent one, or this has been in the past. Okay. Question number 1 is, will I ever get over it? The next question is, why didn't I see the signs? I picked that one because I've been there. And the third one is, what does it really mean to love myself? So let's go back to that first one. Will I ever get over it? Let's talk. Tell us why that question, and coach us through a little bit of that.
Well, I think people in your life, they mean well for you for the most part. If you're, if you have loving people around you, people who, your friends, your family, they mean well, they want what's best for you, and they certainly don't want you to be sad. And in our culture, in fact, from a mental health perspective, if you're grieving too long or you're doing it wrong, you can be labeled with a bereavement disorder. Okay. Just if nobody knew that. So there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of external pressure to get over it and move on. Right. And that's because, particularly in Western culture, we're extraordinarily uncomfortable with talking about suffering. Like, if you don't talk about it, it's not there. Right.
Yeah.
But the truth is that in the face of that, in the face of these kind of, oh, you'll find somebody, oh, you'll he wasn't right for you or whatever, you can start to lie to yourself, grasp onto that as a lie for yourself, that you just have to get over it. Move on. This happens to everybody. It's no big deal, right? Like, no, because you can't thrive by dismissing how you feel. The only way you can grow is by investigating further how you feel. And so for me, that was a really critical question for me to sit with. Will I ever get over it? Because the truth is, I don't think you ever get over anything. Everything just kind of is incorporated and becomes a part of you. and you move on, and you're reshaped, and hopefully you've done the work to be reshaped and changed and challenged in ways that you do carry through with you, because God forbid otherwise it was for naught. It was for nothing.
Right.
And that's not what we have the opportunity to do. When we encounter hardship, we have the opportunity to use that to our advantage, to grow, to flourish and prosper, or we can also choose to just waste it. And so for me, answering that question, will I just get over it, was a question for me, but it was also an encouragement to other people that there's this cultural narrative that says you're supposed to just get over stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's uncomfortable for other people.
Yeah.
That's where I came to. Like, they don't want to hear about it anymore.
No.
life is hard, and it has, particularly for something you've attached your heart to.
Yes.
Not a decoupling of that happens cleanly and quickly to recover.
And the truth is too, Mary, that people are not privy to your heart.
Yeah.
Right. So with this message of just moving on, just getting over it. Oh, you just need a distraction. Oh, you should go on a date. People don't know the inner workings of your heart. People don't know what you need. And you will adopt other people's beliefs about what you need as your own. You will do that if you don't do the work for yourself to figure out what you need. And for me, I needed to sit with this and go, okay, this is horrible. This is painful. I have to acknowledge the level of love that I gave and the level of hurt that it causes me to have that go unrealized, unreturned. And is it indeed wasted? So that one question actually leads to a lot of other ones.
It does. And you have 10 main questions in your book, which I'm sure there could be more. But what I love about the way you've formatted or set up this book is that within that, because remember, this is like question and answer to help us, anyone who's been through a breakup, to process it further and more deeply. And so you end up having at the end of talking about, will I ever get over it and why? And you kind of set up the reader with more questions to help process. Like I'm looking at a few right now. What are you missing the most emotionally? What are the spiritual questions you're grappling with within your grief? How has the decision to end the relationship shaped your grief?
Yeah.
And I think what I love about these questions is it's just not like, well, how do you feel? Like you get a little bit more pointed. And so it helps us to mind those.
Yeah.
Because like you said, nobody really has privy to our heart. Nobody can know it closer than we know it. So
right.
at some level, we have to go, even with it when I talk to friends or loved ones, even if I talk to a therapist, they're helpful, but I've still got to do that very intimate heart work.
Yeah. And it's excavating, right? And so it's interesting as you're sharing that, how I laid that out. I'll add this, Mary, that every one of these questions, the reason that they're in the book isn't because Dr. Sheri, clinical psychologist, thought that they'd be good ones to ask. It's because these are questions that came up for me, right? And I had to answer them. I could not put them on a shelf and ignore them, because if I did, I would be right back where I was.
Well, you're naked Nelly, of course, right? But I would have to say, give you some creds because of that clinical training and experience with person after person after person that you sat across from, you got a skill of asking questions.
Yeah, I will accept that. Yeah, thank you.
And at the very end of a lot of these other questions of excavation, you have this thing of the last question: what are your personal breakthroughs today? And they do not have to be big platitudes at all. In fact, it's just that you can capture them in your book and say, well, today these are the breakthroughs. Because one of the things I found going through my divorce over 25 years ago it was kind of similar in yours in terms of the emotional feeling, which was I thought this was my forever guy.
Yeah.
And I also thought that I thought he was a forever guy. And then when things started to go bad, one of the things I realized was, and with the help of a therapist, one of my breakthrough ahas, or sometimes called oh-does, was that I really wanted to be married and kind of connected with someone more than the person.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea or the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
More so. And I thought, and I'm sure I was, because I was only 25 years old or vulnerable, but not vulnerable in terms of our heart, it's not just age, right? That's so that's the first question. And the last thing I'd like to comment on this, and this, see if this resonates with you. I think it does, because something you said, you were talking about, you never get over it because it shapes you.
Yeah.
And that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, you kind of, quote, get over the emotional load to the extent that you feel it in the moment. But to say my objective isn't supposed to erase this.
That's right.
The objective is how can I use this? And what I would say to myself is, the experience with my ex did not define me, but it surely did inform me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
It formed me about me and about how relationships really work.
Yeah.
Me too, and where the areas that I'm not so good at that. So
yeah, and I'll add this too, that there's a cliche phrase that people say, that I am who I am because of what I've gone through, and so I'll qualify my statement about your experiences shape you. More accurately, your responses to your experiences shape you. It's not the experiences that shape you. It's your responses to the experiences, which is why in my journey to thrive, to grow through this, I permitted it to shape me in a way that would serve me well and be beneficial to me in the future, right? Because it could also have shaped me otherwise if I responded to it differently.
Right. That's right. That's why you have to flip the chip.
Yes.
When you flip it, it's about to go positive forward, right?
That's
Not
right.
stay stuck or in the negative. All right. So here's another question you ask to the person going through a breakup, is why didn't I see the signs? Oh my gosh. I'm like, I've got a wet noodle hitting me on my back. Why didn't I see it? Why didn't I see it? It seems so obvious, And I would have other people like, thank goodness you got rid of him. Right. And like, so tell us more about that question. And why is that such a big deal? I mean, you did say you tried for 5 years.
Yeah. Well, so whenever there's something that goes wrong, and this could be the loss of a job, the loss of a business, the loss of a relationship, the loss of an idea, whatever your loss is, but in particular with regard to the breakup, is your brain automatically is looking for someone or something to blame. And for me, so we're each wired differently. Some of us are wired to look internally for responsibility about what goes wrong in our lives, and others are wired to look externally. Now, I will say this, whichever way you're wired is malleable. Okay. So you're not stuck there, right? But what's most beneficial to you is actually looking internally. But for me, I had used that for so many years to blame myself, as opposed to looking introspectively, like, okay, let's answer this question. Why didn't you see the signs? The truth is you did see them. So what's the more accurate question, right? As I'm digging deeper and excavating, why did you ignore them? That's the more accurate question.
Right.
That's also the more painful question to answer, because that means that I had some culpability in this, right? I can't just say he was whatever word, insert whatever word you want to put about an ex. That's the easy way out. That's not the way of thriving, right? The way of thriving is to say, I chose him, right? Why did I choose him? And why was I willing to overlook the things that I very clearly overlooked or tucked away, right? And so I would challenge us when people say things like, it just came out of the blue. I've never known that to be true and accurate. I've never known that to be fully true and accurate.
Well, to them, it's like, I didn't see it coming because I wasn't paying attention, or I had such denial, perhaps.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see it. So that's why it came out of the blue.
Yeah. And so, like, from my years of work as a clinical psychologist, even now as a thought coach, to my own personal experiences, we saw what we saw, but we didn't see what we didn't want to see. It doesn't change what was or wasn't there. right? It's all about expectation and interpretation. Again, it comes back to our thought worlds. Like, how are we interpreting what we're seeing? And I would add this, because these terms have been like really big, and I'm not a proponent of them because everybody's suddenly an armchair therapist, but like, gaslighting, people will use the term gaslighting. I think as women, we gaslight ourselves a lot. We don't need anybody else to do it for us. We're just like, you're crazy. You don't think like that. Or, oh, did they really mean this by this? And we gaslight ourselves out of being honest with ourselves, out of really evaluating the situation. And that's what I did to myself. Looking back, I gaslit myself like, well, Sheri, you're expecting too much, or, whatever it was. And so that is why I permitted myself to ignore the signs that were evidently there, or to tolerate them. Maybe not even to ignore them, but to tolerate them, do kind of a trade-off, right? Like,
oh yeah, it's like an internal negotiation.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, no one's perfect. So,
Yeah.
I know
Right.
he's just really, really upset, like with my ex,
Right.
and it's just, many people listening to this podcast already know that in my first marriage, it was abusive, physically abusive. And it sounds weird to say, I'm glad he hit me. What I mean by that is, once he used physical abuse,
Yeah.
I couldn't ignore it, and I couldn't excuse it away.
Oof.
It literally was like, wake up, girlfriend.
Wow.
And I'm not proud of it, but that's how I interpret. That was my response.
I'm proud of you for sharing that. That's something to be proud of, because that's learning. That's thriving.
All righty then. Well then, okay, we're done here. We can move on. I'm just kidding. This isn't all about me, but it is what you want to see. And I think we can beat ourselves up. Like you're saying, what I'm hearing is we can beat ourselves up.
Yep.
You told me one time, stop beating the chip out of yourself, right? We tend to, as women, beat the chip out of ourselves between our ears.
Yeah.
Right. And in some ways they're lies.
Yeah.
Our lies. But, I would say this, it comes from, part of this at least comes from a good place of, well, I want to be loved. That is a human desire and need. Yeah. I know not everybody's perfect. I'm not perfect. And I want to experience that love.
Yeah.
So this thing of, I'll either be very gracious or I'll ignore what really are the problems. I think we just have to be kind to ourselves and realize that we really ultimately want that kind of relationship that fills our hearts.
And that's going to lead, I do believe, Mary, into the next question that you wanted to ask about loving yourself. I'm going to let you get there first, but that's what that means. Loving yourself means to be honest with yourself and to be willing to excavate the gritty that's in there.
Okay, so I didn't set that one up, that I knew that was going to be a segue, but let's just go there. And it was, by the way, it was hard to pick just 3 questions because I knew we couldn't cover all 10 in a podcast. So I highly recommend that if anyone's going through a breakup right now, or, just knows of a friend who's going through that, check out this book as a way to help that person process. So, because there's other really great questions. So, but let's go to this next one, which I did pick. What does it really mean to love myself? And one of the reasons I was attracted to this question, Dr. Sheri, is because we hear a lot of messages, or we see memes on social that just says, just love yourself. You're really, be kind to yourself, be good. And I get it, but dang, it's a lot harder than it sounds. So Dr. Sheri, what does it really mean to love myself?
Well, so, and if I may, Mary, so I love is an action. Love is not a feeling. Love isn't something that we just suddenly feel towards ourselves and other people. No. Even in a committed relationship, even in a long-term committed relationship, love is work. Right? It's you can look in the New Testament book of Corinthians that talks about what love is, right? It's patient, it's kind, it's enduring, it's
That's
All
it's
of
like
the
12 adjectives. And when you read it, you're like, oh, wow.
that's a lot.
I don't know if I do all that.
That's a lot.
I need to improve. Right. Exactly. But to your point, they're
Yes.
all actions.
They're all actions.
There's nothing that says in there, love is fuzzy teddy bears.
No, it's not. And so loving yourself is not, and for me, I'm a woman of faith. Loving myself is not about me loving myself as this amazing creature. No, it's about loving who I am and who I'm not. And for me, that's about a recognition of what God designed for me and what he didn't design for me. And if I'm unwilling to face the stuff that I've piled into my life that isn't what he's designed for me, okay, then I'm not loving who he made me to be. I'm not loving myself by not being honest with myself. I'm not loving myself when I refuse to answer the question or answer some of these difficult questions, or when I blame everything on somebody else. That is not loving myself, because I've been designed to have an abundant life, as have you. But there's work involved in that. There's work involved in that. And so loving myself, that here's something, a phrase that I did not, I don't think, write in the book, but it's about being willing to do the work. It's about being willing to be exposed, being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to let God, or, a best friend, somebody see what's really inside. Mary, when I wrote this book, and I self-published it, right? But the day that I hit publish, I had this moment, and I wasn't expecting it, like right after I hit publish, where my breath caught in my throat, like that. And I was like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
What did I just do?
Right. Yeah.
People are going to read this. They're going to know all
Actually, you hope that they'll really read it. Because that's what happens when you finally write the book and publish it, having been there 3 times.
Right.
Everybody can read this. Like, okay, actually, reality is, I hope a handful actually do.
Like all 5 people who write it, right? So, but it did. I panicked for a moment, and the reason I decided to put all of this honesty, all of this ick, because there's a lot of icky moments in there, into a book to share publicly and have this moment of what did I do, is an act of loving myself. It's an act of honoring who God made me to be, acknowledging my shortcomings. This whole book is about me. It's about what I've learned about myself. It's about the faulty thinking that I had, the lies that I believed, right? So it's exposing that and going, I am human. This is how I am loving who God made me to be, because maybe that's how you're feeling too.
Well, and you took the action, going back to love as an action and not a feeling, the action to write the book. And I know the first book that I wrote, it was like catharsis.
Yeah.
I knew I had to do it. And I used to say this. Now, many of you will know what I mean when I say this, because it's going to be like an old school reference. I said, I'm going to write this book, even if I have to go to Kinko's and make 20 copies for my friends and family. Right. So we're like on the throwback machine. So Kinko's was a place, it was called FedEx Kinko's, where they had a bunch of copying machines, and you could go there 24 hours a day, and you could hand someone a disc or, a thumb drive, and then they would go and they would print out whatever it was, and they would bind it and stuff. They have those things today too. But if you're really going to do a book, there's a whole bunch of, electronic printing that you can be done. But that wasn't the point. The point was, it was a commitment to myself, because to finish the writing and the processing of it, because I knew that it was in my path to excavation.
Yes.
So even though it was about me, and I took my challenges, and then once I processed them a bit more, I flipped them into either, you flipped them into questions, and you flipped them into that anyone could use.
Yeah.
And so I look at it as, you use your own relationship as a way of understanding and relating, but you didn't stop there, Sheri. Otherwise it would be true vanity press. You flipped it into like, so what does this mean for you too?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not saying these are all your answers.
Right.
You're saying here's really some really good questions to get to your own answers.
Yeah.
So that is service right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you have, like I said, with every single one of your overall 10 questions, after some explanation as to that, you then have some additional questions to mine that. And like in this thing of this overall question of what does it mean to really love yourself? You say you have this question, which is more appealing to you, to feel alone while in a relationship, or to feel alone outside of a relationship? Why? And which one is most beneficial to you and your ability to thrive?
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? That is service. All right.
It's deeper.
That's deeper. But when you click to publish, you didn't know how people would respond. So I appreciate that you clicked publish, because it's powerful stuff. And that's why, it's an essential relationship all women have.
Yeah.
Is, with a significant other.
Yeah.
And so often we go through breakups, even 40 plus years old.
Yeah.
And I think what this does is that whether we love again is a separate thing.
Yep.
But doing the work to thrive as a single woman or a single woman again.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity here.
Yeah. And it was really, I would just offer this, that my hope for whoever reads the book, my hope for whoever has read the book, as many people have shared with me, is that you see the rawness, right? Because part of loving yourself is swallowing the pride of what makes you feel less than, of what makes you feel like, oh, oi, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Because it's only in swallowing that pride and exercising humility, right, that somebody else is going, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad she said that, and that took a willingness that at the time, beforehand I hadn't considered. But I think the little mini panic attack afterwards was like, people who have known me since I was a little girl are going to read this. And they're going to be like, wow, and in fact, my aunt was like, wow, this was very honest and very powerful. I'm like, yeah, here I am. This is me. This is,
I'm glad she added powerful too, because this is very honest. Why did you write it? Kind of thing. Yeah.
But that's what, and that is the level of work that you have to be willing to do. That's loving yourself. That's honoring who you were created to be, right? Because you were meant for a wonderful, abundant life, but you can't have that by lying to yourself.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you. As we wrap up,
sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I would just highly recommend if you have someone, you yourself or someone that who's going through a breakup and they could use some encouragement. Even if you think they're doing all right, gift them a copy of this book. I will put the link for it in the show notes. But again, if you Googled even Breakup Breakthroughs and Dr. Sherri Yoder, you would find it on Amazon. Is this book applicable to those who have been through a breakup, maybe long past as well?
Well, I will answer that question with a question.
Okay. Answer a question. That's not what you're supposed to do on podcasts. Okay. I'm the one that asks the question. Go ahead.
I mean, have you, if you're the one asking yourself that, right? If you find, is this applicable to me? If there's anything that we've discussed at all that's even just on the periphery, tugged a little bit about something, it's something in your heart, then yes, this is applicable to you. In particular, I would say if you haven't answered any of the questions, by answered, I mean not just giving it a passing thought, but by sitting down and answering, doing the work of thriving. If you haven't done that, then I would say, yes, this book is for you. And I would further add, that I had a couple of readers reach out to me. I had some male readers reach out to me and said, just with some change of a couple of things, this was totally applicable to me and my experiences breaking up. So it's not just for women, but I had people say this is applicable to other losses, like losing a business or you change the questions a little bit, but it really is. It's about processing that and using how you respond to a situation to make it shape you, as opposed to just the situation willy-nilly shaping you as it would.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm glad I asked then.
So you did too. I have a question for you.
What's that?
Okay. Sorry. I know you're asking the questions. Is there a question that came up for you when reading it that you wish that I would have asked or written about?
There's some question on why do I want to do an online search and see what he's up to now? All right. There's a lot there. It's like, well, I don't know. Is his life better? Is his life worse?
Yeah.
Do I want it to be worse because we broke up, and because that wasn't something that was even developed or I could do, right? I couldn't do an online search to say, what are they doing now? What's that? Are they happy? Are they not? Did you end up having children? What did that look like? I could do that. Now we have the internet and we can.
That's right.
Should I? Danger territory to what end? Right. So I have wrestled with that.
So it's interesting. So I removed the temptation for myself. We had stayed friends on social media platforms and stuff like that. Well, wasn't even 3 months after we broke up, and I found myself going back, and I'm like, looking, what's he doing? What? I'm like, I had to answer a question. Is this helpful to you, Sheri? Is it helpful? No, it was harmful.
It's never helpful.
It was extraordinarily harmful. And so I recall one night staying up until I think it took me 5 or 6 hours. I disconnected from every social media platform. And not only did I do that, I went through and I deleted every single picture in the cloud, on my phone, on my computer. And I've missed a couple. I actually just found one last week. Right. But the act of doing that was me saying, no, I'm not going to hang on to what was. I'm going to move forward.
Got it. Okay. Well, there you go. So if you write a sequel, right?
There you go.
This is the 2.0.
Right.
All right. So let's talk nail color again.
Yeah.
If you could create a name for a nail color to inspire us to thrive because of a breakup, what would that name be?
I would call it Unbreakable.
All right. So tell me why, because this is breakup breakthrough. So is this like, I'm never going to be breakable again, or because I broke, or is it about the thriving process?
Yeah. So it's a counterintuitive, right? Unbreakable means that we have so many fears. And I'll just share a quick story before we close out because it's relevant here that I just thought of. A couple of years before my breakup, I was with a friend who had gone through a breakup, unexpected. Her and her boyfriend were coming back home from vacation, and he broke up with her in the car on the way home. Really
geez.
Nice, right? Really nice. Anyway, so she was devastated. She was in her early 50s, and she was like, I thought this was it. And she said, what would you do if you guys broke up? And I looked at her, and it was a question that I answered this, a couple of years before my breakup. And I said, I would be really, really sad, and I'd be okay. That's why I would call it Unbreakable, because so many times we convince ourselves that we're so breakable that we don't do what we need to do to face our what ifs. And we have the capacity. We have the capacity to face our what ifs. And that's what makes us unbreakable.
I love that. I'm wondering if this is a podcast or a prodcast. We're prodding people and we're poking again and again. Of course, we poked ourselves, and the poking can help. Thank you so much, though, again, for coming back on the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast. Our time today, you nailed it again, and I thank you for that. For those who want to reach out, connect with you, tell us again, what's the best way for them to do that?
Follow me on social at Dr.Sherri Speaks, Instagram, or at Dr. Sheri Facebook. You can find me at Thriving Thoughts Global, my nonprofit, where I'm teaching people worldwide how to shape their thinking and not let their responses shape their lives.
I love it. I will go ahead and make sure again to put all those links in the show notes, as well as a link to the book, as I mentioned before. So if someone wants to go straight to that on Amazon, they can do it. All right, my friend. Well, thank you again for your time today. And I look forward to our next conversation, whether or not it's recorded for a podcast. How about that?
Me too, Mary.
Might be third time's a charm. I don't know. Anyway, take care. And everyone will be back next week for another in our mini series about women's essential relationships. Bye for now. And now for the after party I call Flip the Chip, where I take a few moments to highlight something my gal pals share that can help us all flip a challenge or a difficulty that's holding us back into something more positive that helps us move forward. What I want to highlight today are 3 of the 10 questions Dr. Sheri suggests to guide you through your own breakup breakthroughs. The first question is, will I ever get over it? There's a lot of pressure to get over it and move on when it comes to a relationship breakup or really any pain. Give yourself the time you need. It's an opportunity for you to learn and grow. The second question, why didn't I see the signs? Dr. Sheri said, your brain is automatically looking for someone to blame. The truth is, you did see some signs. So the more beneficial question that causes you to look deeper is, why did you ignore the signs? Were you willing to overlook or diminish the behaviors that were bothering you? And the third question is, what does it mean to really love myself? Dr. Sheri said, love isn't a feeling, it's an action. Loving yourself means being willing to excavate the gritty and the ugly stuff to see yourself and to give yourself the chance to heal and grow. Of course, you can also use your nail color to cheer you on by simply putting on a new color and giving it the name Unbreakable, as Dr. Sheri suggested, so that every time you look at your fingers or your toes, you're reminded that you have the capacity to do what you need to do to face your pain, what ifs, and to thrive. You won't break. You are unbreakable. You can make good choices to create the career, business, and life you want, one step, one nail color at a time. I look forward to being with you next time on the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast. Ready to live and laugh more? Know a friend who could use some of that too? Then subscribe at livelikeyurnailcolor.com or your favorite podcast app and share this episode right now with the person who popped into your mind. Together, let's flip the chip to be stronger, smarter, and happier.